All right, here we are. We're almost done. This is session 3. This is the final session in your abuse prevention training for Pinewoods Chapel. So now that you know, we're going to look at some real life case studies and have you think through what the solution, what the answer to each of these scenarios is. Here's the first one. This is a real life example that happened several years ago in my experience. A man who molested his 3 daughters over the course of several years, but who was never charged, volunteered to serve in Awana, which is a weekly program for children ages 5 to 12. His application was intercepted when his past discretions came to light, and he was encouraged to serve in a ministry that did not involve children. What plan to protect or abuse prevention measures protected the children in this case? So think about that. We have several steps, or 7 steps, going through each one of them. The only thing that would have allowed us to see his background and his experiences, because he was never charged with it, so it wouldn't have shown on his police check, the only thing that would have brought this to light would be a reference check, and that's exactly what happened in this case. It was someone who knew his history, who knew the family, was called and contacted as a reference, and they were able to say, no, it's not a good idea, don't put him with kids. So there you go. We have 7 steps in our screening process, and it's sometimes, most times, it seems like overkill, but really it's not. Each of those steps is there for a very specific reason, and this is a great example of how one of those steps accomplished a purpose that none of the rest of them could have. Next scenario. A 5-year-old, while sharing in Sunday school, uses some sexual references and terminology that most children her age would not know. The Sunday school teacher feels uncomfortable about what was said and thinks it may indicate some kind of abuse or inappropriate exposure. With your knowledge of our abuse prevention policy, what should the teacher do? Okay, now do you remember back to whose responsibility it is to report and all of that stuff? I have to tell you that usually the answer to this question when I present it in a group is the Sunday school teacher should go to the pastor. We've already talked about how that's not what they need to do. The Sunday school teacher themselves is responsible to go ahead and report that situation if they feel that it indicates abuse. Now, if they have a doubt about it, they're not too sure, they can call anonymously, like we were talking about before in session 2. They can call the Children's Aid Society anonymously and give them what they've witnessed, the facts that they've seen, what they've heard, and the social worker on the other end will be quite happy to tell them, yes, that's a reason to report, or no, you don't need to report. So while the answer generally is that the Sunday school teacher should go to the pastor, I'm hoping your answer is different to that one. So those are the scenarios that we wanted to go through, and I am going to give you a quiz at the end of this video as well. There's going to be a quiz that you need to fill out, and then after that you'll be completed. But before we do that, before you move on, I do want to just remind you of this verse, 2 Corinthians 8:21, for we are taking pains to do what is right, not only in the eyes of the Lord, but also in the eyes of man and women and all of culture around us. Obviously, we defer to what God says is right, but when at all possible, we're going to make sure that we are operating so that there is no appearance of evil, that we are above reproach, and all for the glory of God and for the safety of the kids in our care. So now I want to remind you that if you have questions, please do comment below with your questions, or email or text me with your questions, and I will be happy to answer them. So thank you so much for completing this training. I know it was a lot to take in. I hope that you're not overwhelmed by all of the information, but that you have been able to kind of disseminate it and that you'll be able to put it into practice. Now I am going to leave links to the paperwork that you're going to need to complete your screening if you haven't completed it already. So go ahead and do that. Make sure that as you're doing your screening, you're completing every one of those 7 steps. In the office, we do keep it on file where you are in that process, but your ministry head themselves may not be quite aware of exactly where you are. So just make sure that you're keeping track. And if you do have any doubts, contact me in the office. You can email me again, info@pinewoodschapel.com. Thank you so much for your commitment to this process, and may God bless you as you serve Him through serving His people.